I would like to thank everyone for coming today to Ask Alumni. I'm Carla Rockhold, and I work with the OSU Alumni Association, and we're one of the groups that put these types of events on. So if you enjoy what you hear today, we hope that you'll come to more of these Ask Alumni panels. And I would like to introduce you to Allie. She is going to take it from here. Allie.
Thanks, Carla. So my name is Allie Rimpakis, and I'm the Director of Alumni Relations for the College of Agricultural Sciences here at Oregon State. And I'm really excited to bring you this alumni panel brought to you in partnership with the OSU Alumni Association and with the College of Ag Sci. We've got a great panel ahead of us, really fun conversation that I'm excited for. And I'd also like to introduce our moderator for the panel, Renee Albertson. She's a research associate and senior instructor with the Marine Mammal Institute and the Department of Fisheries, Wildlife, and Conservation Sciences. She's located out at our Hatfield Marine Science Center on the coast, which is out in Newport, which not everyone may be aware of. That is a part of the College of Ag Sci, which I'm really proud of and happy to boast about. So Renee, I'd love to pass it off to you and maybe give a little bio about yourself, what your research is in, and then we'll kick it off with our panelists.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I do a lot of teaching at the Marine Mammal Institute and teach a lot of the marine mammal-based courses, a lot of our experiential learning courses in the spring, and then a marine mammal course in the summer, and a physiology and behavior course in the fall. And my work currently is mainly with humpbacks in French Polynesia. I have a couple interns that are working on some projects with that in genetics and also in photo ID with happy whale. And then I have a research project off our coast on harbor seals, looking at habitat use around Newport and then north of Newport and then as far south as Bandon.
Wonderful. Well, Renee, if you would like to hand it off to our panelists or introduce them yourself, either or, I'm good with, and we'll kick off the questions.
All right. Yeah, I will let them introduce themselves. Florence, let's start with you.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Florence Sullivan. I graduated with my Master's of Wildlife Science from the Marine Mammal Institute at OSU in 2017. And I am currently the research biologist in charge of the humpback whale catalogs at Pacific Whale Foundation.
Great, thanks. And Logan?
Hi, everyone. My name is Logan Pauline. I also was a master's student at the Marine Mammal Institute. Graduated the same year as Florence in 2017. And I am now a postdoctoral researcher at the University of California, Santa Cruz, down on Monterey Bay. And I'm currently working now with the Ocean Sciences Department and the Institute of Art and Science to develop new ways to communicate the impacts of climate change on marine mammal populations worldwide.
Okay, thank you, Logan. And Jane?
Hi, I'm Jane Vaneski. I graduated from the College of Fisheries and Wildlife Sciences in 2022. I actually was an eCampus student, so my experience was a little bit different in a good way. But I'm currently a U.S. Fulbright Scholar to Mexico, so I'm down here in La Paz, Baja California Sur, and I'm earning my master's degree here studying abundance trends and habitat use of Caribbean manta rays. And I work on manta research on this side too, but that's my primary focus.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I think to kick this off, we will just start with a few questions. We'll kind of go one question at a time through all three of you, if you wouldn't mind. So to begin with, I just have a few kind of basic questions that it would be great for all of you to answer and give our audience an idea, kind of some background information or skills that might be helpful for them. So we'll just kind of go in reverse order now. So Jane, since you have the floor, let's start with you. Which skills or knowledge acquired while you were doing your program has been most valuable in your career?
Sure. So for this, I was kind of thinking of things that were like facilitated by OSU and not facilitated by OSU. So in terms of skills that were facilitated, I'm sorry, you guys, I'm reading Spanish and it's making my English worse. In terms of things that were facilitated at OSU, I participated in the URSA program, and that was really, really cool for me. So I actually did a remote laboratory assistant job for about 6 months in the EcoChem lab there at OSU. So if you guys haven't looked into the URSA program yet, you really should. They're paid positions, they're short term, part-time, and you can learn a lot, a lot, a lot. So that was great for me because I learned how to code in R and Python. I made some cool connections. And outside of OSU, I learned to get really good at being rejected, which sounds funny. But if you like think about it, there's so many opportunities that you have as an undergraduate to apply for different opportunities, whether it's like small internships or like little research things. And it's really, really good to consider, like when you're doing these applications, to just be really authentic and like put your best foot forward. But there's tons of applications, it's high volume. So if you don't get the position, don't get discouraged. Just keep trying because something's going to shake out. So it's not personal and just keep going.
So Jane, I just want to clarify because it is so interesting that you were an eCampus student. Did you do the URSA program when you were eCampus or did you transfer to Corvallis?
Yeah, I had a remote URSA position.
Okay,
So,
I didn't realize they did that. And is URSA,
yeah.
just to clarify for everyone, is that only for freshmen and sophomores?
And transfer students.
Okay.
So if you transfer within the first like 2 years, I believe, you can do URSA, or as a freshman or sophomore, you can do URSA. And I was able to stay on in my lab after the internship ended, so I got even more experience, and that was really, really helpful for me.
Okay. That's great. Thanks so
Yeah,
much.
of course.
Okay. Logan, let's just go back down the line here. What skills and knowledge acquired during your program when you were here were most valuable for you?
Yeah, I think the big thing for me, and I think this thing I'm still really trying to figure out is sort of time management. Um, Coming to OSU was sort of the first time. I had done a little bit of field research with marine mammals on the East Coast, sort of sporadically between 2012 and 2015. But coming to OSU, I was then sent to the middle of the Antarctic for 4.5 months straight and trying to figure out how to be in the field doing field work, especially incredibly isolated, and still manage all the additional tasks, right, that you have as a graduate student in a research program. Um, but that as well, just navigating field work, right? A lot of us, are the main focus of our research is often field based and trying to navigate that as well as coursework and classes and obviously all the writing that comes in the end. It's a big task, and I think one of the big things that has been really helpful for me is to always just take a step back and incorporate things that really aren't part of the day to day of being in graduate school or doing research because it just keeps you grounded. And very simply, it kept me sane, and didn't make, the challenges and struggle as complicated, but still always made it feel like I had room to grow and was growing in my program and, building, positive relationships with others, which I think was really key.
Okay. And just to clarify too, were you doing field work as part of your undergrad as well before you started with us or?
Yeah, so I did my undergrad at the East Coast at Duke University. And while I was out there, I got an REU position, and ended up being a marine mammal observer with NOAA multiple times off Cape Hatteras of North Carolina, doing stuff with pilot whales, sperm whales, beaked whales. And then after that, I worked as a technician out there for a year, which sort of started the progress for what became my master's degree, and then what transitioned into my PhD degree, and then a lot of what I'm doing now as well. Applying a lot of those skills I've learned over the last 10 years now to populations of marine mammals and also some seabirds worldwide. So.
Okay, great. So that was one thing I just kind of wanted to hone in on, was the REU was one of the things that got you started in that, as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. And Florence, what about you with skills and knowledge acquired during the program with you in the Gem Lab?
Yeah, sure. So to build off of Jane and Logan, I would say that absolutely time management is still something that I'm working on, but definitely, was a skill that I had an opportunity to practice during grad school. And the thing that I think has gotten me hired was my R skills. I took R classes and GIS classes at OSU, and then I followed that up with a professional certificate in R and statistical analysis through the University of Washington continuing education programs. And feedback that I got when I received this position was that was the sort of the deciding factor, was my skill set in R, as opposed to everybody else in the giant pool of applicants. So my general piece of advice that I always give is chase skill sets and not species, because a lot of the things that are, hard skills to learn, like the time management, like the R, like the stats, like the GIS, like the photography, like the drones, like scientific diving, like any of those other things, they can be translated from species to species, as opposed to trying to really focus on, oh, I want to work with dolphins. Oh, I really want to work with sea turtles. Trying to get skill sets that are going to be applicable across multiple species is really useful.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And actually, that feeds into our next question. So if I can just stay with you, looking at specific classes, obviously classes, did you take classes that were specific to R or GIS, or were those just part of your lab in the Gem Lab, or was that part of, just part of a class, or how did you pick that up to begin with?
Yeah, absolutely both. What's cool is that we have a lot of experiential classes at OSU that will have week-long, oh, try this package, try this software, see how it's useful. And then there are other courses that are deeper dives into that specific skill set. So I don't know if, does Charlotte Wickham still teach at OSU? She was my instructor for R, and she is Hadley Wickham's sister, and Hadley is the guy who codes all of the tidyverse for R. And I didn't know how cool she was and what awesome, skill set I was acquiring while I was her student. I was just like, oh, right, this is what we're learning. And then it turns out that everybody else is like, oh, wait, you're good at the tidyverse? Great. That's awesome. So if she's still teaching, I would highly recommend her. And then there was a really cool, I want to say spatial analysis and GIS course through the geology department, and I'm spacing on who my instructor was. I apologize. But that was useful as well.
Those
And
were
then
the
I really like all of the sort of special topics courses that allow you to get you familiar with doing literature searches and really critical reading of the literature, and how to get good information, and think about how to incorporate other people's ideas into your own research, or how to use, the community of scientists that we have across fields, right? It's in marine mammal work, particularly, we don't have to reinvent the wheel completely. We can look at statistical analyses that are being done in terrestrial environments and apply them to our species too. But you have to be willing to actually go look at their literature, right?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That is really great advice.
And I'm going to jump in. We have a question. Someone wants to know, can you explain what R is? Well, we're talking about it.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. Sorry. R is a statistical software. It's a coding language that is primarily used by biologists for doing statistical analyses, but you can do a whole bunch of stuff in it. You can build GUIs, graphical user interfaces. You can make really nice maps, just like in GIS. You can make really pretty figures for your papers. It has a lot of versatility.
Yeah, and there's packages, like statistical packages, like you're talking about, that would be used by all different, depending on the species that you're studying. We use it in genetics, a bunch of different packages as well. So yeah, it's quite versatile. And I know since you guys have left in 2017, and Jane can probably speak to this because she is a more recent graduate, a lot of our courses are starting to incorporate this. So our statistics courses have it, our undergraduate courses have it. And so it's something that, students are learning before, as they are moving through now as an undergrad. I think it was harder for you guys. You kind of had to seek it out and seek out those courses specifically.
The other thing is that it's free. You don't have to pay for it. And that's why a lot of people use it. And there's a lot of training courses out there that are free as well.
Yes, very good point. Thank you
Also,
for
to jump in, sorry, YouTube is amazing. You can find so much, many small, informal, instructional, even just about how to use a specific package. You can learn how to do everything on R, on YouTube, everything for R on YouTube. So get on the internet. There are tons of resources.
So Jane, that's a great point. Do you find yourself going, shoot, I'm stuck on this one particular, how do you do this in R? And you can literally just type that in and find a YouTube for it?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, so far, but I'm right now using some kind of more popular packages like Ectal for acoustic telemetry analysis. Some of the more well-known and the bigger packages, you can literally be walked step by step through how to do an analysis. So I also do I want to say it can be frustrating. So you just have to be very patient with yourself while you're in there. But if you keep trying, it's fantastic what these tools can do. And as Florence mentioned, it's free. So that's a great benefit.
So
My
Jane,
favorite package is the praise package. If you haven't used it yet, Jane, it's very simple. It's just library praise, and then the command is praise and open close parentheses, and it randomly generates a compliment. So I put it at the end of all of my scripts so that when I'm really frustrated and all I need is something to pick me up, then I get a little compliment.
I love that.
that's great.
Mhm.
Jane, we're just gonna, if you don't mind, we'll stay with you, and Logan will come back to you in a minute if that's okay. So Jane, I'm just curious, did you learn R in your undergraduate courses? In some of them at OSU?
A little bit. So I took Intro to Population Dynamics, which is a great course if you're interested in working with population dynamics. And even if you hear the word right now, population dynamics, and you're like, boring, you're wrong. Because this is a huge part of ecology and it's so relevant in almost everything you do. You're going to probably run into population dynamics. So in that course, I started learning how to use R, and that's where I got my first kind of small introduction, but most of the heavy learning did come later, during my master's degree and in my own research. So a little bit.
Okay. And other courses that you would recommend taking that helped you from OSU?
Sure. I loved Food from the Sea. And when I first heard about Food from the Sea, I was like, I don't eat seafood. Why would I take Food from the Sea? But what I didn't know was that working with sharks and rays, every single thing you do will be through the lens of fisheries and fisheries impacts. And also that continues out to people impacts of fisheries. So Food from the Sea basically just teaches you about fishing structure, fishing industry impacts on marine life and on people and just kind of like governance and all that, if that makes sense. It's really comprehensive. So if you are wanting to work with sharks or mantas or like any kind of fish, knowing very well fisheries is a huge benefit. So food from the sea was great for me for that.
And by fisheries, do you mean working with fishermen or working with like government fisheries agencies or both?
Both.
Okay. Yeah, just to be clear. Because it is sort of a, as a scientist, you're not really isolated anymore, right? You need to be able to communicate with stakeholders.
Yes, definitely. That's huge. Yeah, and I guess like I'm trying to think of how to describe it the best way. Like, for example, the biggest threats to manta rays right now is global fishing. So how are you going to understand like how to really like work with the ecology of your species and like research your species if you don't understand the primary threat for your species and not like your species, but whatever species you're working with at the time. So for me, it was great. Anything involved in the ocean, you're going to run into fisheries. So it's really good to know what you're doing there.
And fisheries data, I mean, there seems to be a lot of data, right? They are
Yes.
collecting a lot of data, either GPS data or whatever,
Right.
which can be really helpful to
Yeah.
scientists as well, I imagine.
Absolutely. And I also loved food from the sea so much because it gave a lot of different perspectives. It wasn't just like, fishers are bad and like we're good and they're bad. That's so like dated and it's just not true. And it's so nuanced. So that class really helped me kind of break down all the nuance of global fisheries and how like food from the sea does affect people and how it does affect animals and just kind of like that whole web. So, and I loved the way it was taught. Like it was fun, it was funny, it was interesting. So it was great.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, and Logan, what classes helped you and in your career?
Yeah, so first off, I'm not known for having the best memory, so I had to just bring up my transcript from OSU here, and I have it on the screen in front of me. But I know Florence talked about this already, but I think for me in my graduate career so far, one thing to this day I'm still not very good at, nor is my wheelhouse is statistics. I consider myself more of a field biologist and, a lab biologist. That's where I spend most of my time. But I have to say, probably some of the best courses I've ever taken were Charlotte's 5, 11, 12, and 13, the three series statistical course at OSU. And I still reference a ton of my notes and the lab reports and all that kind of stuff we had to do all the time because now, I code, a third of my life here. As a postdoctoral researcher, I just feel like, that's a large part of what we have to do, right? We got to do the work and then do the analysis to show what it means and why it's important. But I'll say, one of the other things that was really important to me was a lot of the stuff I was really interested in was sort of higher level physiology, endocrinology, more on the borderline of like veterinary medicine. And I think one thing I've always recommended to students I work with today is don't ever be afraid to branch out of courses outside of your department. And looking at my transcript right now, it looks almost like 30% of the courses I took were outside of fish and wildlife, but I was able to get credit for them with permission. And, one of the courses that was really, really useful, and I know Jane talked a little bit about this already with population dynamics, was the bio department's theoretical ecology course, sort of breaking down the basic fundamentals of the math that we use to study populations and the impacts predators have on prey dynamics, et cetera, from a very fundamental mathematical perspective. And that course was one of the first courses I was introduced to another coding language, which is called MATLAB, which is another very popular analytical framework and statistical package that we use as biologists. It has also a very big role in the engineering realm as well. Um, and and then as well, I took classes in the zoology department. One of my favorite classes that I still talk to the professor, Dr. Metalandis, all the time because the course was vertebrate endocrinology through the lens of veterinary medicine. And I use a lot of that work in the work I do with marine mammals, whales, dolphins, seals, sea lions, and also seabirds all the time. So never be afraid to branch out and push yourself, out of your comfort zone. And I recommend too for anybody that wants to be a field biologist, immerse yourself and try and make relationships with people so that you can get field experience, even if it's something you might not have any interest in. Just to gain basic skills and understand what it's like to work in the field, the safety that you need to often consider as well. And so here at UC Santa Cruz, where I did my PhD as well, one of the best courses I took was sort of like wilderness survival and wilderness first aid, because you just never know what you may encounter working out in the field, and being able to work through something but also remain level-headed in a situation that might call for it, is really important, especially, working out of the water, working with very large charismatic animals. Because, you might hopefully down the road you'll find yourself in a position where you're mentoring someone, and you just want to make sure that, you feel comfortable in that responsibility. But I think anybody that's considering ecology or biology, any foundation in statistics nowadays is absolutely key. And now I didn't really, again, wasn't I didn't experience any statistics until my master's degree. But now looking at some of the local elementary schools here in like the K through 12 program, and these kids are coding R, in seventh and eighth grade. So I feel like the oncoming generations are way, way further ahead of the game than I was. So hopefully by the time they're looking for jobs, I'll probably be on the way out, but we'll see what happens.
And I just want to highlight a point you said, sort of branching out and looking at those other classes, because isn't that kind of what got you that really awesome paper on the pregnancy rates of humpbacks? Isn't that was kind of outside of, traditional fisheries and wildlife?
Yeah, so it came down to us trying to understand how we can tell if a large animal that we can't bring into captivity is pregnant, right? Because as Jane had mentioned, pregnancy, well, when we want to understand population dynamics, we need to understand how many babies are coming into that population any given year. And so, for instance, like a humpback whale, how do we figure out if a humpback whale is pregnant? Well, we can use a veterinary dart and get a small piece of skin and underlying fat from the animal, and essentially put on our chemist hats and grind up that tissue and isolate different reproductive markers that we all have as well as mammals, and look at how they change across the season. And that can tell us whether or not an individual is pregnant. And then again, we can put that information into the greater sort of ecological context of how might things like climate change impact a whale's ability to be pregnant, or how might ecotourism or shipping impact an animal's ability to be pregnant. So these are all things we're thinking about. And, I think one of the great things I love about my job is for every question we answer, we find 10 new ones that we now need to figure out what they mean as well. So it's a great job. It's great job security, and it's always intellectually stimulating, which for me is one of the most important parts.
And do you, just sort of leading into our next question, in terms of industry, originally you talked about you did a lot of field work when you were in your undergrad and stuff, but how did you how did you get that going? How did you connect with others in the beginning and then in the industry, or, get those internships going? How did you get it started?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another key aspect of sort of being in a STEM field, is finding ways to branch out and build relationships and colleagues and people that you might work with for the rest of your career. Because science is no longer a one woman or one man show, right? That's just not how we do things anymore. We work together, and we come in with all different perspectives and hold each other accountable, and that's really important. And for my early career, that was made due by making relations with internships, by developing a relationship with an initial PI, a professor that I expressed interest in their research program. And for me, that was Dr. Andy Reid, at Duke University, who also happens to be the Marine Mammal Commissioner right now in Washington, D.C. And from that relationship, that's where I met my master's advisor, Dr. Ari Friedlander, who was at faculty at Oregon State, who I then did my PhD with down here at UC Santa Cruz as well. But I would say the other opportunity you want to do is go and apply and talk about the work you're doing at conferences, present your work, because you'll be able to get critical feedback and productive feedback on what you're doing, and have people come and talk to you about, oh, I would love to collaborate, or oh, this is what we've been thinking about with a whole different species where the methods they're using might be relevant to what you're trying to do anyways. Um, and just find opportunities to market yourself and just have very simple one-on-one discussions. And as well join, I'd also say for me, professional societies. So like I know a lot of us are part of the Society for Marine Mammalogy. I'm also part of the Society for the International Wildlife Endocrinology Society, where we all talk, and we have an email chain where we're talking about how to look at endocrinology from elephant toenails and what we can learn about, animals in South Africa, or feces, or we're doing things now with our group with humans, looking at hormone patterns from mummy teeth from, ancient times and stuff. So again, I know Florence touched on this too, but you don't ever want to box yourself in on a species, right? You want to use the techniques and the methodologies you master as part of your career as your selling point. I'm now working with a human fertility clinic at the University of San Francisco, where we're trying to understand how to replicate delayed implantation, or a period where an animal breeds but then doesn't get pregnant because of environmental conditions for 3 to 4 months. And we're trying to incorporate that knowledge and sort of physiological environment into human medicine as well, to advance the health, of humans. So never did I ever think I would do anything with humans, but you open these doors and meet people at conferences, and you just get chatting, and next thing you're doing things you never thought you would be doing down the road. And I think it's really powerful, and it's really humbling, and it's another aspect of my job that I really enjoy.
Okay. Florence, if you can kind of expand on that a little bit, did you start with an internship, and were conferences something that you did before in your undergrad or before undergrad? How did it all start for you?
I have always loved being in the field. And so I have gone out of my way to look for field opportunities. And I have been very, very lucky in the programs that I have been a part of. That my undergraduate was in biological oceanography at the University of Washington, and that is a very field intensive degree path. And then OSU, I was the first graduate student in my lab. And so I literally helped order the furniture for the lab. So I was really able to design my program as I saw fit. And that included several months of field work every year on the Oregon coast, looking at gray whales and their foraging ecology. And I even got my lab to buy me a kayak so that I could go and look for zooplankton and see what the gray whales were eating. It was great. Um, I got on a tangent. Right. I'm kind of one of those do as I say and not as I have done, because I am a first generation student in the US. And so I've learned a lot of how I should have done things the proper way. And I have gotten very, very lucky in being able to be here today. So I got my relationship with Dr. Lee Torres at the Gem Lab because she was a new faculty. And when I literally just came and knocked on the door at the Marine Mammal Institute and was like, "Hi, I'm interested in a degree. Who should I talk to?" And they were like, "Oh, we just hired 2 new faculty. You should email these 2 people." So I did. And Lee was like, "I'm moving. Call me again in 4 months when I'm actually in the United States." And I did. And she was like, "Yeah, sure, let's have a Skype call." And then I was a student, which is not how you should do things. But it did work. Sometimes just knocking on doors does actually work. I've gotten a lot of opportunities through listservs. So for marine mammal folks, the MARMAM listserv that is run through the University of British Columbia has a lot of good opportunities. I'm also on a listserv because I'm interested in Arctic and Antarctic work for I'm forgetting their acronym, but it's IARC. And I got to do a 6-week NSF funded research cruise in the Arctic Ocean for early career scientists through that program. That was pretty fantastic, looking at ocean ice atmosphere interactions. Uh, there's a Seven Seas World listserv that posts a lot of fisheries type things beyond just marine mammals. Yeah, I've gotten really lucky with listservs, and also in addition to, conferences and networking and being willing to say yes to things that you wouldn't otherwise expect to lead anywhere. For example, next week I'm going to help some scientists on island to do some bird banding for an endangered seabird that we have here, because they were looking for volunteers. And sure, I signed up for 3 nights. We're going to go out and catch birds and band them. I'm a marine mammal ecologist. I haven't done seabirds before, but I think it's going to be fun.
Okay. Yeah, that is great advice. I love it. So Jane, we just have probably a few more minutes. I would love to hear from you, and then we're going to open it up to any questions from our audience here. But Jane, can you talk a little bit about your path to the scholarship that you have now?
Yeah, sure. Really quickly, I do want to touch on Florence's answer because you said like do as I say, not as I do. I'm gonna go against that, and I'm gonna say cold call as much as you can. Like it's great to meet people at conferences, but let's be real, conferences cost hundreds of dollars to attend. Like sometimes more than that. It can be really hard to get to conferences. And some of like the really hyper competitive internships like REUs, even if you apply to like 20, you might not get one. So I like the non-traditional pathways of kind of like knocking on doors, but virtually, which is what I did multiple times, and I got 2 internships like that. So I feel like you should knock on doors and you should cold call, just to put it out there. But for Fulbright, what was really, really great is that I actually found out about Fulbright because I got a Gilman scholarship, which if you guys don't know what that is, it's a study abroad scholarship. And so in the OSU office, they were like, well, if you applied for Gilman, it's kind of like the younger sister or whatever of Fulbright. So maybe you should apply for Fulbright. I was like, yeah, maybe I should apply for Fulbright. And so what's really cool with Fulbright is that you get to literally like write your dream project and then go for it, you know? So the path to that, what was actually really, really nice, like, because it's kind of building on the things that Logan and Florence have said about taking every opportunity you can, not boxing yourself in, just learning as many skills as you can. That is so great because I did that for a few years. And then when I went to apply to Fulbright, I already had enough background, like in the skills that I was proposing for my project, like my master's project. So even though my master's project was really different than what I had done in the past, I had kind of built that foundation just from like being in the ecochem lab and working with sharks and just doing like a bunch of things that were unrelated. They all ended up being related for Fulbright. So if you are interested in Fulbright or in these globally competitive scholarships, OSU has an office run by Leanne Adams. She's fantastic. And I wrote like 30 drafts, I think, of my Fulbright application. And it was a really, really good process because I got to kind of pick everything apart and I learned so much about my goals and like what I actually wanted to be doing through that process. So I would definitely recommend that to anyone. Like Fulbright is fantastic. It's a great community. And even if you don't end up going all the way with it, the application process is really a good exercise. Does that answer the question? Or
Yeah, it does. And so I noticed you mentioned Leanne in something that I was reading about before this.
Yeah.
And so OSU, can you just tell them like how they would get involved with like so at OSU, there's a scholarship, basically a scholarship department that they would talk to, or how would they go about that?
Yeah, so what you can do is go to the link that I think someone just put into the chat. I think it was Carla. Thanks, Carla.
Yes, I put it in the
Um,
chat.
Great. Yeah. So check out that link and just read about the different kind of scholarships. And again, back to what Florence and Logan have said, just look for these opportunities because there really are so many opportunities. And especially at OSU, it's such a great support system. There are staff to help you and like walk you through these processes. So I would start there if you're interested in Fulbright. I would start thinking about like, what is your dream project in your dream place? And then read about kind of what you need to do and the requirements of the grant, and then figure out how to make those two merge because you can do it. Like I was writing my Fulbright application from my mom's house in Ohio during the pandemic. Or yeah, it was during the pandemic. And like I got my degree from Cleveland for the most part. So you really can make these things happen. You just have to go out and look for these opportunities and take advantage of them when you get them.
Yeah, and I would just like to emphasize that as well. Just because the reason that I do a lot of work in Tahiti is because I originally just, emailed somebody out of the blue and said, "Can I come help you in the whale season?"
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
those things it does happen.
I will say to touch on that, there's a good way to go about that. Like, for example, when you do contact a researcher or someone you've met online, you should do like some good reading of their work, be informed, and kind of go in with a question, because we all know, like, as researchers, you're so busy, you get so many emails. If someone is just kind of like sending you a vague question, it's like, what do I do with this? But like, if it like makes sense and you're like, okay, they're serious about it, like, great. I think it's really effective. I mean, it worked for Florence, it worked for you, it worked for me. You just have to put yourself out there.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that's really good advice, like not just their bio page, but like their publications and, the work that really does interest you and why you would want to work with them.
Exactly.
I think that's a
Yeah.
really good point. Okay, so I do want to turn it over to questions now. What is the best way to do that?
Yeah, I'm happy to read the questions if you'd like me to.
That'd be great.
And then any of the panelists can jump in and answer them. So the first question was for Logan, actually. It says, please speak more about your work in Antarctica. I'm trying to explore different avenues to do research down there.
Yeah, so I've been working in the Antarctic. My first year down was 2015, and I've gone every year but two since then. It's a pretty miraculous place. My dream for any up and coming biologist, ecologist is just to go see the environment, whether or not you have any interest in actually working with anything down there. But I think what's so special about the environment and sort of what Antarctica does to wildlife is you get these massive abundances of wildlife in this very tiny area that we work on the peninsula. Like you may walk on a beach and there's, 2.5 million breeding pairs of king penguins, and just seeing penguin after penguin go up the mountainside. Um, but other than like for me, most of my work is with United States Antarctic Program, which is a federally funded Antarctic program through the National Science Foundation, and so that's where most of my work has stemmed from it. But one of the other things that myself and my supervisor have been working on over the last year is developing a lot of relationships with the tourism industry that's now very, very rapidly expanding into that region. I think this year we're anticipating we had about 150,000 tourists visit the Antarctic Peninsula probably over the last 3 months. And one of the things they're always looking for is looking for people to come on as naturalists and just get guests excited about the environment, whether it has anything to do from the zooplankton that are in the water to the whales that might be eating them in that environment, or what the ice is doing, or the new species of mosses that appear to be growing on the peninsula. Um, so there's always an opportunity to get down there as a naturalist as well and work and get others excited and passionate about this environment. Because I think working in the Antarctic, that's what we're all trying to do right now because of how quickly it is changing and the impacts these are having on the wildlife down there. But look around and look for programs, universities, or labs that have a large presence in the Antarctic, which is one of the reasons I wanted to come to UC Santa Cruz, is because there's a very, very strong history of working in the Antarctic, probably since the 70s. One of the largest Antarctic wildlife programs once came through UC Santa Cruz on the Weddell Seal program. That's run down through McMurdo Station. Um, and so just look around, branch out, make those connections, introduce yourself to people at conferences or meetings if you're there. Don't be shy. And also one thing I would say is don't take no for an answer the first time. Reach out and try again. That's how I got one of my first internships is I kept getting over it via email, and then I just showed up in Dr. Andy Reid's office, and was like, I'm not taking no for an answer. And this is why, because, this is why I feel like I can be a benefit to your program, right? And I think, as Jane mentioned, going in with some background knowledge about what that program is trying to do, um, and sort of talking about how you can benefit the program and what you can bring, I think is really important and shows that you're already putting in the work. So yeah, branch out, talk to people. There's a lot of professional organizations like Camelar, and IATO that do a lot of work in the Antarctic and that can get people on and involved within the tourism industry and conservation and management as well.
Great, thank you, Logan. And Logan and Jane and Florence, if you wouldn't mind in the chat box and making sure it goes to everyone, put a great contact, a way for people to contact you, whether that's via email or your LinkedIn. So if they have any follow-up questions for you after today's presentation, that would be great. Another important question that people are asking is about how did you find jobs and internships? So where did you look? What did you do? So if any of you would like to answer that question, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Can I want to build a little bit off what Logan and Jane have said and respond to one of her comments. Jane said, oh, conferences can be really, really expensive. And that is so true. And we have all three of us sort of said, oh, but it's a good opportunity to network. And I know that networking is also kind of a big, scary thing of like, oh my gosh, you mean I have to go talk to a stranger? Okay, so yes, there are big name conferences out there that are wonderful places of learning, but there are also lots and lots of smaller conferences where you can get your feet wet, and still learn something great. So if you're interested in marine mammals, there are the student societies of marine mammalogy, and Oregon State hosts the Student Society conference on a rotating basis every couple of years. And there's the State of the Coast conference that happens along the Oregon coast. I can't remember if it's in Coos Bay or Newport or if it also rotates as well. But that's a place where students can present their work. There are smaller meetings like the American Cetacean Society. They have monthly meetings, and that's usually a bunch of old retired folks who are very excited about whales. But the thing is, they still have contacts. They're very excited about up and coming students. And they're the kind of passionate people that are like, oh, wait, did you hear about this exciting new thing? And then you can tap into those networks just by being friendly and being in the right place at the right time. So try not to be scared about networking. Another word for it is just making new friends, right? So lots of opportunities there. In terms of how did I get my first internship specifically? My first internship was at the University of Washington. I worked in the Barrows labs, which was looking at hydrothermal vent bacteria and viruses. And that came out of one of those special topics classes that I was taking. And I really admired the professor. I thought his teaching style was awesome and I wanted to learn more. And I was looking for something to do that summer. So after class one day, I literally just went up and talked to him and was like, hi, how can I be involved? And he was like, oh, do I have to pay you? And I was like, no. He was like, okay, come work for me. And I did end up getting a small stipend, but being keen about that kind of thing. Most of my opportunities have come from just going up and introducing myself to someone or through networking and listservs, and answering emails when they dropped in my lap.
Right. Anyone else have any advice on jobs and internship searching?
For searching, I would honestly double back to what I was saying about cold calling or cold emailing, because like I said, I did get 2 internships that way. The first one was because I was reading scientific literature. At the time, I wanted to work with whale sharks. I was like, oh my God, they're so cool. So I found someone who was well known for doing that. And I just contacted her directly and was like, do you offer internships? And it turned out her organization did. So that was how I started an internship that kind of led actually to my master's degree with a different organization. But yeah, for me, I'm a huge proponent of like the cold call or cold email, however you want to call it.
Yeah, and I'll just add too, I think the other thing, right, if you're planning to go into university, rely on the sort of network that your institution already has available to you, whether it's people in admin or like the scholarship office at OSU or the REU office, like I had at my undergrad, and offices on internships and study abroad programs to get fieldwork related experience. There are already these foundations in place to help you with that, and rely on them to help figure that out. Um, yeah, and for me, that was always really helpful, is to, go and chat with someone who it's their job to help you figure that out. And that's okay.
I think we have that at OSU as well. Just to throw that out there, I'm pretty sure we do have an internship coordinator. It used to be Shaylin Pack, but it's probably someone else now, but we do have that at Oregon State.
So we have specific to Fisheries and Wildlife Department is because we require an internship as part of our degree, our undergrad degree, then we have an internship coordinator, and it is still Shaylin Pack. And so I don't know about the rest of the university outside of that department, but there seems to be, between OSU Go and the scholarship department and all of that, there's a lot of resources. Are there other questions?
Yes. Thank you for answering all of those. The next question would be, is there advice for somebody coming into this as a second career? So if you've been out there doing something, what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's using this as a second career?
First of all, good job. Like, that's fantastic. Second of all, I'm again a big proponent of the skill sets, not species. So it's probably a good idea to look at your resume, look at what you've done, and see how you just probably need to change the words and the verbiage to to show people, hey, I actually do know how to do database management. I actually know I have good attention to detail. I can do quality control. I can take good photos. I can, whatever it is that you're looking for in your next job, you probably have a lot of applicable experience. It's just a question of changing your narrative structure so that people recognize it, right? And depending on what your career is, maybe you want to look into the programs of the professional certificates, or if you notice, hey, everybody is saying that I need this skill set and I don't have that one, figure out what, weekend or week-long intensive course you can take, or a class, or a certificate that can just get that bullet on your resume, so that you can say, yep, I've got that one.
Someone else asked, many of these internships and fieldwork positions are either very low pay or no pay at all, but they're necessary to build your career and make your contacts. How do you support yourself financially while taking advantage of these opportunities?
I can speak on that a little bit because I've done like unpaid internships, and my first internship I actually did have to pay a fee to work. Looking back on it, I really wouldn't recommend doing that. Try to avoid doing that if possible, because usually like if you're paying someone to work for them, it's exploitative, it's not accessible, it's not a good practice. And unfortunately, this practice is really, really common with like whales and sharks and these big charismatic species. So with that, try to go outside of the box. For example, with Marine Megafauna Foundation, I think they charge like $3,000 a month or something to do internships. But I cold emailed and I did like a data analysis internship for them in, again, my mom's house during the pandemic. But I did a remote internship and it was just unpaid. So I think unpaid internships are kind of just like a really tough reality of our field. And when I did it, I just kind of had to work really, really hard. Because when I was a student, I also was a waitress. And I was working in the ecochem lab and I was doing my volunteering. So I think you just have to put in a lot of work and be ready to do it, but it does pay off. That might not be the best answer, but it's like this kind of like bad reality of our field right now. So yeah, but if you're doing like that kind of thing and you're putting in these really long hours, just know it's temporary. It's not forever. And once you kind of build up your skills, you're going to have more opportunities that will compensate you or compensate you better.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that this is a high-paying field by any means. And it is an unfortunate reality that many of us have had to deal with so far. I think that there is positive movement in the Society of Marine Mammalogy in general, calling out that this is an unacceptable barrier to access for many, many people. And so, for example, my organization, Pacific Whale Foundation, has stopped our internship program because it was unpaid and unfair to ask students to come for 3 months and live in Maui, where it's just stupidly expensive to live. And we're collaborating with some university programs that offer a stipend for their students to do internships so that we are not paying, but we're looking into options for like, how can we make this equitable, right? There are scholarships out there that, again, you have to take the time to find and to apply, and then they can allow you to sustain yourself. Sometimes it takes being creative as well. I was really struggling in my first years in grad school with the stipend, and one of the ways that I cut costs was that I talked with the university, and I was the RA in the dorms at Hatfield Marine Science Center, which meant I didn't have to pay for housing. And so that really helped me. So I wasn't getting much for a stipend, but I was able to cut my living costs in that way. And, I have to acknowledge, I am one of the privileged. I had parental support for being able to do unpaid internships for undergraduate and in between school. So, sorry, we're working to make it better.
Okay, our next question is about Jane. I've got a question, Jane. I'm looking to work in marine mammalogy, and many of those opportunities are abroad. Can you speak on working in another country, namely where English isn't the first language? What are the challenges presented by this?
A lot, but don't get intimidated. For me, I didn't speak any Spanish when I first moved to Mexico, so I started learning when I got here. My master's degree is all in Spanish, so that's been a great opportunity for me to get good, well, decent, at Spanish. But you just have to really understand that what you're taking on is big. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be stressful. You have to like be really prepared to kind of leave your ego at the door and just be like, okay, I'm going to sound dumb maybe, but like I'm trying. So honestly, just trying and practicing that language a lot is going to open up a lot of doors for you. And I've had amazing opportunities here that I would not have had in the US. So I fully recommend studying, like doing an international degree if you can, if it's relevant to your field and it will support your goals, as it did for me. But yeah, so I guess I think if the question was about advice, yeah, it's just like leave your ego at the door, be prepared to make mistakes. It's okay. Literally everyone does it. And it's a really, really rewarding experience in the end. Like I learned another language, so it's great. It's really cool.
And I just want to add to that, again, to say the OSU Go program has those courses where you can do the study abroad for, a couple weeks or a term and test it out and see how, if it'll work for you. Did you do any of those, Jane, when you were doing your undergrad?
Yes, actually, I did. I got a Gilman scholarship to do a study abroad program in Ecuador, and part of that was immersive. I took a Spanish class there that had that was my first formal introduction with Spanish, I guess. And it was Spanish for the natural sciences. So I tested the waters there, and I already knew like, okay, this is going to be difficult. But again, I was really committed to it and I really wanted to do that. So yeah, like Renee said, definitely test it out because it's not a thing you want to commit to without having like any idea what you're getting yourself into, because graduate school is not an easy thing to get out of. I guess if you've already started, it could be really complicated. So kind of like before making that commitment, test it out if you can. And like I said, there are a lot of scholarships that you can go through the OSU Go office and the scholarship office I already mentioned. If you're interested in studying abroad, but you think you can't, you're probably wrong. Well, and there are scholarships and there's help. So ask for it and look for it and definitely try it out.
Yes, that's very true. All of your whatever scholarships you have for your OSU academic education, you can apply to study abroad as well. So I'm going to ask Florence, can you tell more about what biological oceanography is?
Sure. So oceanography is the study of the ocean's biology, physics, the chemistry, and the geology. So oceanographers really look at everything that is smaller than plankton. And the really the building blocks of the ocean and how the system works. And so I found that to be a really good foundation to take the next step and then ask, okay, so we have how the system functions. How does the larger like ecological web fit into that system? Because I'm, curious about the charismatic marine megafauna, of course, like many of us are, because those are the species you can see easily and they're wonderful to watch. But knowing the building blocks of the environment that they inhabit has actually been really, really helpful for understanding the system better, personally. So yeah, the program at University of Washington, you can specialize in any of the four: physical oceanography, chemistry, chemical oceanography, geological oceanography, or biological. And so my capstone project there looked at viruses and bacteria at hydrothermal vents. Really the tiny, tiny stuff. So I like to say that I have worked my way up the food web because that's where I started. And then I worked in Alaska on fisheries, salmonids, jellyfish, that kind of stuff. And then now I'm here with whales.
And I also think it's just really wise, Florence, to learn about where these species are, right? I mean, if you want to work in the marine environment, I think taking oceanography courses is a pretty smart thing to do.
Oh my goodness. I mean, if you want to understand, why are your whales eating food in a particular area? Well, why is the food there? It's probably because of the upwelling zones. What is upwelling? Well, that's because of the way the water moves through our oceans. How does the water move? Well, it's because of convection and because of the atmosphere and, solar heating. And it gets so complicated so fast. But one of the coolest things about science today, I think, is that we've gotten to the point where we understand a lot more of the building blocks. And so we can start to put the puzzle back together, which is why I think it's fun to be in this field.
I want to add too, I feel like that knowledge that you're talking about, Florence, that's what separates a lot of like the great scientists I know from like the ones that are just good or like, okay, like when someone like really understands what's going on in the whole ecosystem, that can make really amazing science. And it's not possible without understanding, like you said, like all the way up the food web or like why things are happening. So it's really essential to know that.
Well, I wanted to say thank you guys so much for joining this panel, and to Logan and Florence and Jane and Renee for attending tonight and having this great conversation. And the little girl who wanted to be a marine biologist growing up is in love with this conversation and everything that I learned. One real quick note before we head off, I wanted to make a note about Damn Proud Day, which is coming up on April 24th this year. It's a big day of giving for Oregon State and connecting back with the university. And the College of Agricultural Sciences actually has 3 funds connected to our conversation tonight. One for the Marine Mammal Institute, one for the Coastal Oregon Marine Experiment Station, and one for the Big Fish Lab, which is a part of COOMS, the Coastal Oregon Marine Experiment Station. So if you're at all interested in giving back to the programs that have so greatly influenced the careers of Logan and Florence and Jane and the work Renee is doing, and if you're passionate about this, anything helps, and it's a really fun day to be a part of. So Carla is going to put some information in the chat for you all for more information about these funds and what kind of programs and research they go to. So I'd really encourage you to take a look at that before heading out. But thank you all again for attending. Loved the conversation. Hope you guys all had a good time. And we'll see you next time at our next Ask Alumni.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. And go Beavs.